Right, okay, we are now live. Welcome everybody to this evening's Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting held here at the Bexhill Town Hall on the 14th of October at 6:35. Welcome everybody. There we've got a few members online as well, so welcome to those. Chief Executive as well. Yeah. Mark, yeah, other broadcaster, Mark's online as well. Good. First item on the agenda, do I have your authority to sign the minutes of the 9th of September 2024 as a correct record?
So move.
Thank you. Item 2, apologies and substitutions. Any, please?
There are none, Chair.
Good, thank you. Additional agenda items, there are none. Disclosure of interest in dispensations. Anybody? Anything jumping out? Probably not, I wouldn't think. Hopefully. No one online, no. Item 5, straight in, recommendations of the Digital and Customer Services Strategy Task and Finish Group, pages 3 to 30 on the agenda. You'll remember we had this last meeting in September. Councillor Cook wasn't overly happy, so she's had a work through it with Mark, and now she assures me she's much happier than she was. So, Councillor Cook, over to you as Chairman of the Task and Finish Group.
Thank you very much, Chairman. This Digital Task and Finish Group has been quite a while in the making. I would like to pay huge tribute to Mark Adams for the immense amount of work he's put into this. There were just a couple of things that, under discussions we've had at our pre-meeting that we would like to slightly amend. I've emailed Mark with the couple of comments that we made earlier. But the other one was to item 3 on the officer recommendations. We wonder if it should be the Head of Digital and Customer Services be granted delegated authority to update the DCSS and Customer Charter in consultation with a Cabinet portfolio holder, but also perhaps reporting back in some way so that any major changes we as members are more aware in case any of our ward residents should contact us with a question or a query. And other than that, I am really happy to resolve that we send this up to Cabinet and recommend it to Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that? Yep, Councillor Legg. Thank you. Any discussion? John?
Yes, I think we do need to... It probably is less worrying on this one, where we have got a review period after 18 months. But there is another item later on where we're delegating authority, either to update policy or change it, by a senior officer in conjunction with the member. That obviously gives you considerable flexibility. So I'm not against what you're doing, but what it does seem to me, Chairman, is that we do need to have a reasonable report somewhere on what has been changed, with the ability of a challenge to be put in, probably by some form of call-in procedure. So we don't want to chase trivial ones, but if there's something we are really concerned about, this committee should be able to challenge it, as indeed we can challenge other decisions that are taken by the executive. Can I move an amendment to that effect?
So would you be happy if, say, for example, Councillor Cook was included in, as she sort of chaired the meetings and she knows the sort of ins and outs? Would that be enough to include?
I'm very happy for Councillor Cook to be advised, because she obviously will be as chairman of the Task and Finish Group. But I think in the longer run, and maybe this is more important on the other one, we do need a mechanism whereby this is actually reported somewhere, possibly on the website, possibly by an email to all members, with the possibility of calling if we want to challenge in some way what's been decided. But I'm less worried here, as I say, because of the 18-month review. I think when we get to asset disposal, it becomes a rather more serious issue. And we are setting, since it's beginning to happen slightly more and more, we are beginning to set a precedent that rather than this being delegated to the corporate executive, in other words, the cabinet, more and more we're getting senior officer working with the relevant cabinet member. It's a system I'm well aware of at county, but you then need to think about the possibility how that gets challenged if you think an unusual use has been made of the power, or actually the result is controversial.
Mark, any thoughts from you?
Thank you, Chair. I believe it's a sensible approach. The delegated authority is there just to be a bit more reactive to, say, changing legislation or to make minor amendments. But of course, it's sensible to raise awareness to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, along with, like I say, that extension, that caveat to say, that this have been changed. I do think that's a sensible approach.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else got any points to raise? No? So we're happy as are?
I'm happy to leave the finding of the word to you and Vicky.
Okay. You're happy with that, Vicky?
Absolutely, yes.
Good. Okay, we'll put it to the vote then. Yep.
The other point I won't try and draft here, but the executive summary, when I looked at it, really isn't an executive summary. It's a statement of fact that this is the product of a committee. But the executive summary really needs to be a straightforward statement of what we're trying to do for the members of the public, with the more detailed stuff being really for the purposes of those who are using the strategy amongst officers and members. But at the moment, I think that needs to be looked at and turned into a proper, a one paragraph executive summary, simply saying what the aim is.
There was a word I can't find it now. There's a word we didn't like, wasn't there? Vicky, you probably
It was on the introduction, it was item 7. We were a little bit concerned about the word simplistic, and we requested it be changed to straightforward, but I've already contacted Monk about that.
Good. Okay. Everybody happy then now? Yeah. All those in favour? Oh, that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark, once again, for all your hard work on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mark. Right then. Next one. Item 6, pages 31 to 44. What we got here? Refresh of the active robber partnership strategy, getting robber moving. Deborah's taken this one. Purpose of the report to inform members of the process taken to produce a refresh of the active robber partnership strategy and the subsequent strategy that has been produced. Deborah, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. Active Rother is a partnership made up of local government organisations, the NHS, activity providers and community groups. The partnership is coordinated by Rother District Council and supported by a funding agreement between East Sussex County Council and RDC as well. This report has been produced by experts at Rother District Council, at Active Rother. Stuart Ramsbottom sitting next to me, it's all his work. And it's been produced to inform members of the process taken to produce a refresh of the Active Rother Partnership Strategy. The updated strategy builds on previous versions which have guided the work of the partnership over the past 10 years. This collaborative work ensures we have an active partnership approach at the district level. This supports the best practice model recommended by Sport England, Active Sussex and East Sussex County Council Public Health. Such a model is seen as key to success when making the case for additional external funding, as evidenced by our continued collaboration with public health and our success in recent years in obtaining additional funding for targeted work via Active Sussex. The strategy aligns with the Council's health and wellbeing leisure facilities strategy. It also ensures that the Active Rother programme continues to be well placed to contribute to the Council's Live Well Locally priority as part of the new corporate programme. So I will now hand over to Stuart, sitting beside me, who will provide an overview of the key elements of the strategy. Thank you.
Before you start, Stuart, I've got a hand up from Councillor Maynard, who I assume is declaring an interest as a member of East Sussex County Council, and I suppose that Councillor Cook will probably have to do the same. Would I be correct there, Councillor Maynard?
Well, it's a bit more than that, because obviously I'm the lead member for adult social care and health, and the public health element of this report is fundamental in terms of the overall strategy. So I will declare a personal but not a pecuniary interest as executive member for adult social care and health on East Sussex County Council. Thank you.
Thank you. And the same for you, Charlie? Yep, okay. Got those, Lisa? Yep, cool. Thank you. Okay, Stuart, over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Deborah, for that introduction. I'm just going to take a few minutes to highlight some of the key elements of this refresh of the Active Rother Partnership Strategy. It's very, as Deborah said, it's very much a collaborative approach. We began work on this refresh in 2023, and this involved two workshops, consultation workshops with our range of partners. We began by asking partners to sort of reflect on Active Rother over the last few years, the past 5 years, and to provide some feedback on what we've done well, what more we could do, etc. And from that work, as well as the work I was doing to sort of look at the policy evidence base, the emerging aims and priorities developed to ultimately shape the version of the strategy that you've had presented to you in the report. So we've taken the approach very much, as I say, collaborative approach. The vision of the strategy is very much focusing on sport and physical activity opportunities and how those can help to enhance the health and well-being of Rother residents. What we've done this time is the message of the strategy around getting Rother moving reflects that evidence base around the importance of how moving and some form of regular movement can help and have significant benefits in terms of health and well-being, just encouraging residents to move on a regular basis. The aims very much reflect around empowering residents, working with residents and communities, using insight to develop our work. Often that can be gained through partners who input into our partnership approach. We look to identify and address barriers wherever possible, barriers to access to sport and physical activity participation, so that we're contributing to work around reducing health inequalities, etc. The strategy document identifies 6 priorities for the next few years. and those are focused firstly around people, our residents, but with a particular focus on those less likely to be active or largely inactive in terms of their sport activity participation. So that's a particular area of focus, those individuals. And we have some data that tells us, particularly around certain population groups and certain areas within the district at ward level where those people are more likely to be. Secondly is around developing our workforce, our sport and activity workforce. This is an area we've done a lot of work in the last few years. Those are the people who work with our residents to help support them to become active. But we recognised 5 years ago there was a need to do some work to help develop the skills of that workforce so that they could identify and support the needs of our inactive residents. So developing the workforce will continue to be a priority. Also looking at how we can make the best use of existing places to support inclusion and participation, and if possible, of course, look to any opportunities to develop new places where people can be active. Fourthly is communication. We have a marketing and communications element to Active Rother's work, and that will continue moving forward in terms of communicating what Active Rother is all about and the work of our partners. Fifthly is measuring the impact of our work. This is something we've developed in recent years, looking at the sort of the participation rates. Are we influencing people to be active? But also looking at the outcomes, the impact of that, and the development of things like case studies is highlighted within the strategy as being an important area that we will continue to develop and work with partners on. And then finally, we will continue to develop the partnership very much. Yes, Rother District Council hosts My Post, hosts the programme coordination, but it is very much about working with partners and developing that collaboration. So it is a refresh, but it very much provides us with that direction for the next 4 or 5 years. Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart. Couple of things. How do you encourage someone to be active if they don't want to be?
Well, that's the ultimate challenge.
Yeah.
I mean, it's working within our communities, working with residents through our partners to try and identify what are the barriers to engagement in activity participation, and if at all possible, trying to address those barriers so that hopefully a sort of model of behaviour change will start to kick in and people recognise the benefits and will start to engage and participate.
Okay. The other thing you hear on the radio, you read in the newspapers about, doctors giving out prescriptions for someone to go for a walk or to get swimming lessons post-operative or whatever, stuff like that, which to me just seems a bit crazy. If you want to go for a walk, you don't need a doctor to give you a prescription. It doesn't cost anything to go for a walk, but there it is. Obviously, there's health benefits to keeping active and mobile. So, do the health authority fund that sufficiently in your terms, or not? Because they keep saying there's an obesity crisis and everything else, and if people sort of, difficult to say, if people sort of looked after themselves maybe a bit better, then they wouldn't get to the stage where they needed to go to the doctors. So do the NHS have a plan that works with you, or is it sort of a bit piecemeal and depends where you are in the country almost?
I think it's a developing situation. I think there are opportunities emerging in terms of what's happening locally with the NHS and the wider health and care system, the integrated care system approach. They've identified within East Sussex there are 4 health outcome priorities, and at least 3 of those Active Rother can contribute to delivering against those, things like cardiovascular disease prevention, addressing frailty, respiratory health, improving respiratory health, and also mental health and well-being. So the work that is going on around those 4 health outcome areas, there's definitely opportunities, and I'm doing work to look at those opportunities and how we can try and embed Active Rother in that, and hopefully trying to attract some additional funding at some point.
Cool, thank you. What do you got? I'll go for Councillor Burton. You're an actively taught person.
I hope so. Well, I can answer your question earlier about training, about reinforcement of people to be active. Many moons ago, I attended a course put on by Active Rother in this very room, where we had a specialist in reinforcing, helping people to move forward with this. So I remember that well. However, my points I wanted to mention today, am I echoing? Is about active travel, and in fact you've mentioned you're looking for further funding for expanding your role, which is huge. You know, your get Rother moving. Well, Rother is a lot of people, as we all know. But I particularly was able to highlight in the carbon assessment result, one of the last documents, where the active travel and public transport receives a partially meets best practice awareness, significant room to improve is the heading on here, which I'm sure you are aware of. But being active every day, walking to the bus stop, following the footpaths, etc., is a huge potential to get a lot more people moving around as against going to a yoga class once a week. So, and we all know it's good for us, pressures are great, but perhaps that looking forward could be a way to really enhance your programme, use your communications to have a greater reach. My thoughts.
Thank you, Councillor. I mean, the active travel agenda is certainly something that we are keen to develop further in partnership with organisations such as the County Council, who are leading on that work, in particular looking at a new approach under their transport planning, etc. So certainly East Sussex County Council, obviously through Public Health, are a partner in Active Rother, but we also work with their team, their transport team, and we'll be looking, as their work develops, we'll be looking to see what else we can bring into Rother.
Great, thank you. I look forward to the results to show.
Now, I had someone else on that. So was it you? No, it was Mary. Councillor Mary Barnes first, and then I'll go Councillor Byrne.
Thank you. Since we've got the expert here, I take it in Mr. Ramsbottom, although I would not like to cause Deborah to feel that, you know, I was casting her out. I just would like to know how this all sets itself into motion to go. I can see how it's made up, and I can see that Rother is playing an important part in that. But really, how does the final target of the exercise come about? So, for example, I mean, we all know people in our own communities who should be fitter than they are, but how would they attract the attention of the Active Rother partnership when it's made up of how many people, and where is it based, and how many people will it be covering in the whole of Rother? I have no idea of the size and the scope, even from the report, I'm afraid. Could I have a little bit more information?
I mean, the Active Rother partnership is made up of a wide range of groups, sport and activity providers, community groups, etc. I mean, I've got a mailing list, an emailing list of close to 100 individuals. We regularly get 18, 20, 20 plus people attending the quarterly partnership meetings that are held here, but there's engagement that goes on outside of those meetings. So it's a mixture of virtual face-to-face contact, but also the digital online contact as well, that enables that reach through that network, enables the reach into communities, particularly our sort of priority communities, as I said earlier on, where we know people are less active.
In our very rural neck of the woods at Etchingham, we have a wonderful lady called Sarah Jakes, who is, she is the person who sets herself in Etchingham and answers questions. How many Sarah Jakes are there about, or is she your rural contact?
There are not many Sarah Jakes. No, it'd be great if there were a few more like her, indeed. And I did meet her at a meeting during the summer, and there's certainly some follow-up work to do there, and developing. It'd be great to develop a few more like her, certainly.
Councillor Byrne, was your question on the same lines?
Sort of, but again, two questions. This is a refresh of the strategy. What areas have you refocused your staff in? In other words, what are they doing as of now that they weren't doing last month or the month before?
I wouldn't say there was anything going back 2 or 3 months ago that they're doing differently, but there's certainly, from when the last strategy was produced in 2018-19, there has been a significant development. I described earlier on the priority around developing the workforce, giving our activity coaches, instructors, the skills and the knowledge to work with those inactive people to support them, address their needs and support them. So that's been a really big change in recent years, and we want to continue that and develop more of that.
Second question, really on monitoring. Do you monitor the membership size of the local sports groups and local clubs? Do they, when they come to the Active Brother meeting, do they sort of give you any feedback on all these clubs tend to have a lot of members who are just members and others who are really actively involved? Do you physically monitor all the clubs in the Bexhill area that are really to do with active leisure?
Our monitoring work tends to focus on where there's new programs that we've put in place that require some monitoring. Are we attracting, could be new members to attend the session, new residents who particularly come into our target groups for inactivity. So no, we don't do a monitoring of the core membership of clubs and groups, etc. No.
I suppose my other point is, do you think it'd be useful? Because obviously you're doing a lot of communications, and nowadays with social media, someone might not be prompted to join one of your new programs, but it might say, we should start going down the boxing club again, or the squash club, or the rowing club, or whatever.
Dancing.
And that would be a really interesting thing to sort of see if you're monitoring the effectiveness of your comms programs, other than just on your specific new initiatives. Would that be a good idea?
It's certainly something that we can consider, and what I'd also be interesting to see what other areas such as Active Hastings and in discussion with Active Sussex, see if there's some similar work that they're doing that we could look at as well.
Okay, thank you. I'm going on the right now. So I'll start with Councillor Barnes, John.
Yes, in an important sense, I was looking at your aims and thinking empowering is fine, but really we want to educate and encourage as well. Education, because it's not just we have an ageing population, but fundamentally we have an unfit population. Physically rather inactive, tending to obesity. I'm sorry, Terry is looking suspicious. If you walk around our streets, I think you might surprise yourself if you observe the amount of obesity around. We do know quite a lot about how much physical activity each week is necessary to stay fit. And so education is quite important. Encouraging is also important because those sort of problems are all benefited by actually doing the relevant amount of physical activity. And it can be something as simple as walking. So I think we do need to work very closely with parish councils. Stuart will have heard me say this before. Parish councils and with patient participation groups. I'd like to know more, therefore, about your objective to connect individuals and communities. Do you have a website? Do you have a Facebook page? Do you encourage these groups to stay in touch? Do you provide a list of relevant clubs on a website? In your area, possibly. What I've seen go on in Burwash very effectively is the setting of 10,000 step walks using our very extensive footpath network, walking with a purpose, visiting churches perhaps, that you have a circuit of churches that people can walk so that they're interested. Dance is another important one, and we have an awful lot of dance groups going on at the moment very successfully. But how do people know they're going on and when they're going on? Finding out about them is sometimes quite difficult. As a village hall trust, we know about the ones that book into our village hall, but we don't know much about the surrounding villages. So it seems to me we miss some very obvious points, which is the footpath network, working close with the ramblers. Another area I would have liked to see a bit more about is cycling. Clearly that's another very important area of people keeping fit. Park and run, park runs. I wasn't aware of just how extensive that is, and whether any of that works in our area. It's not so much what is here is open to question. All of it's admirable, but we need to raise our eyes and see if we can widen it out to the population more generally. And sports clubs are admirable. I've noticed the elderly taking to walking football lately, and there's a very good walking football league, which again must encourage fitness. But how I will get a grip on this as an individual councillor, let alone an individual citizen, I don't know. And I need to be signposted. And so that communication, connectivity and signposting, I think is a very important part of the partnership's work.
Certainly.
I'm
Totally.
sure, Stuart, you got an answer for that.
Just to say, I mean, take on board all the points you've made, some of the examples, things that you've mentioned there around walking, cycling, walking football. Those are all things that we know are happening, that partners are leading on. This is a strategy, it's a high-level strategy. You know, underneath that are those activities that are happening. I do reports twice a year which give examples of exactly those sort of things that are happening.
The one question was about website and Facebook.
We have an Active Rother website. We've also got Facebook, Twitter, X pages. Yes.
Councillor Thomas, Chairman of Council.
Thank you, Chair. I should have declared earlier that I curate a Facebook group called Healthy Rother, and I've been doing that for some years. And as part of that, I repost the post done by Active Rother. And also, there's quite a large number of people now who post other activities of the sort that Councillor Barnes mentioned: health walks, dances, gyms, balance exercise, etc. And so anybody who wants to know about what's going on in Rother, that's one of the ways in which you can find out, because I do manage to post a wide variety of things, and so do other people. I just want to say what wonderful work is done by Healthy Rother, and I think we don't yet understand that this is one of the most vital things that a district council does, and one of the most vital things that government as a whole can do. Because when it comes to health, prevention is so much better than cure. And I think that the kind of things you were talking about, Chair, I entirely agree with what you're talking about. When you talk about social prescribing, because that's a much better way than sending people to take Valium or to take antidepressants. Health, walking, cycling, etc. is a wonderful thing for physical, mental health combined. And so I think it's going to really push very, very much indeed. Just two examples. I myself, when I suffered from severe anxiety in my 40s, I was prescribed going to the swimming baths instead of actually taking tablets. And it set me on a route of regularly swimming, and I've done that for most of my life as a consequence. So I think this can be a very, very helpful thing, and can be so much better than giving people tablets, which might have a temporary effect, and which also had side effects in a way in which swimming has healthy side effects. So it's very, very important. But I just want to say a couple more things. I want to say, first of all, we need to ginger up the county council on this, because I think the county council does let us down in terms of, and I'm sure our Councillor Burton would agree with me here, in terms of cycling promotion. I've seen the number of cycle routes to this town whittled down to about 24 to about 1.5, and even that we don't seem to have made much progress with. And I know that the chair is a very keen cyclist, and I'm sure you also would like to see more promotion of cycling. And particularly with electric bikes, I now, when I go to Galley Hill, it's delightful. I can see all these 70 and 80-year-olds zooming up Galley Hill, electrically assisted, but therefore able to keep going and cycle to Hastings or wherever they're going. And I think we need to kind of promote modern things like electric bikes as a way of getting people into cycling. In Germany, every other bike sold is an electric bike, and I think we've got some way to go before we catch up on that. And just finally, I think that it's very important to work with the NHS, because that's the whole key. So we get a culture that it's the norm to socially prescribe rather than to chemically prescribe. I think that's a real important change. An organisation I'm connected with, Bexley and Bloom, we had somebody who comes and gardens because they were prescribed that by a doctor. So I think we need to do a lot more than that, and I think as an authority we need to really value and promote the brilliant work done by Active Rother. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McGurk.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick point. I also know that I'm very aware of the excellent work you do, Stuart, and you reach out, you're very proactive about connecting groups. And it was nice to see Rye Runners referenced in the report as well. They're a brilliant organisation. My question, though, is similar to what several people have raised. Where is the gap, or what can we do to promote and develop the infrastructure, particularly around cycling? I mean, we have, as Councillor Barnes was mentioning, we've got great walking infrastructure. Hopefully we've got the King Charles Coastal Path coming to completion soon. The consultations just finished for the Ryder Camber stretch, which we hope will come to fruition soon. But what can we do to really promote, work with organisations like Sussex Greenways, who are, concerned about cycling infrastructure? Because that's the biggest thing that's going to encourage cycling. It's not a pleasant experience cycling along some of the lanes of East Sussex sometimes. So where is there a gap, and what can we do to fill it and promote it?
That's a challenging one. I think, as I said earlier on, when we talked about active travel, I think ensuring and facilitating some conversations in partnership with East Sussex County Council has got to be the way forward on that infrastructure side of things. I don't see Active Rother, in terms of my work, taking the lead on that, but as a partnership approach, bringing East Sussex County Council to the table and looking to perhaps to develop the work that they're doing more within Rother is through that partnership approach. That's the way I would see that moving forward.
Councillor Clark, you've been patient.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's so important to how important partnership working is on this, you know, and good health starts at a very young age. You know, you need to get our young people being fit. And in my own ward, Bexhill Town Council is funding additional playground facilities very shortly, which has been passed by the Amenities Committee, I think, which is brilliant because we get more children, there's more activities for that. That's important that young people do that. When you talk about doctors, I work closely with my doctor's pharmacy and surgery. Yeah, a lot of doctors do tell people to walk, but a lot of it's based on people who are going through personal issues, mental health, bereavement and things. And they tell them that walking is very good for them. So that's one aspect. Councillor Burton touched on public transport. County Council got a substantial amount of money last year and improved local bus service, especially in Bexhill, because they used to terminate at 6:30. They now run 11:30. In fact, I'll probably get a bus home tonight. And what that does, of course, is people walk to the bus stop. They don't take their car into the town. And also it's helping the local economy as well, because they're probably going to the restaurants of Delaware, places like that, because they can get back late at night. But yeah, it's frustrating because for many years I've been getting on to county about putting a cycle route from Sidley to Bexhill College, so the youngsters can cycle. And Westford Road has got such a vast grass verge, it'd be very easy to establish. But I've never got anywhere with it, you know. But that's an example where it would have been really good for local health and young people cycling. Thank you.
I suppose the bottom line is it's down to, you know, we know county are sort of tight with money, so as long as they can keep funding you, because that's how I understand you're funded, we need it. We also have Adrian here who's funded by us, who's our sports officer. So, yeah, it's a difficult one. I slacked myself last week. I only did 105 miles on my bike, so but there it is. And I am generally going to Kent because the roads are a bit crap in Sussex. But there you go. Councillor Cook.
Thank you very much, Stuart, for bringing this report to us. I notice in the final pages you reference the Rother District Council Health and Wellbeing Leisure Facilities Strategy 2023 to 2033. Items 4 continue a very extensive list of all the partnerships. Perhaps we need to revisit that to make sure they're all still in existence. But I think maybe that could be a big step into achieving what Councillor Barnes would like to do, which is to promote and let people know. And maybe that's something we at Rother District Council with our alerts could perhaps include one week, just to sort of let everybody know that, you know, these groups are there. So with that comment, I'd like to resolve as the agreement, the officer's recommendation resolve that this report be noted. Thank you.
Yeah, and seconder, is that Councillor Barnes? We've got a point.
Happy to second that. There is one point I just wanted to draw attention to on 43, which maybe Stuart could brief me on outside the meeting. We are showing land use as amber, not green. I wondered why, and it's probably best answered outside the meeting. suspect it's going to be too complex an answer to expect Stuart to come up with it tonight.
Yeah, we'd need to explore that one outside the meeting.
Councillor Creaser's come in late.
This is an observation,
This is not gone in.
a nice one. Where they were doing all these activities, they had something called chair aerobics, which took place in Icklesham, it's Icklesham Hall. And I'm one of the people that is supposed to represent that, so I went along and I took 2 people with me. So I had 3. And chair aerobics is hard work. But it was really good. And the nice thing about that, which is really important, it's all right doing all these outside things, but an awful lot of people don't have the whatever for the weather or whatever. But this is, it does social, emotional and mental health things, and it was an absolute hoot. And Daisy, the lady that was doing it, she was extraordinarily fit. Couldn't really blame her for that, but it was just the fact that everybody had a good time, they enjoyed it, they went away, and the following day they were all whinging about, including me, about the pain and that. But that kind of thing, because it's different, and it covers a different group. So well done, thank you.
Right, Councillor Timpey, you're the portfolio holder. Anything you want to add? You come along.
Yeah. No, it's been fascinating listening to everybody's comments. I could just echo, though, this is a very, very significant partnership, and there's an awful lot goes on that obviously people don't really know about. So maybe we could do a better job of that. But as far as sharing, could I just say, I like Healthy Rother that Councillor Thomas does. Whenever there's an Active Rother post that comes out, I share it wherever I can, because it's so important that people actually know about all these different things. I mean, there's hundreds of them, isn't there? Which is really important, and I like the idea of Rother Alerts. I've mentioned it many times. It's such a good vehicle. So I would encourage everybody to share. But I'd like to acknowledge Stuart's really hard work, and Adrian, ably supported on this report, and it was really good to hear all the positive comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, the officer recommendation is be resolved to the aims and priorities of the Active Rother Partnership Strategy, its alignment with RDC corporate priorities, and the important role that RDC undertakes in hosting and coordinating the Active Rother programme, and its contribution to improving health and well-being of residents be noted. It was a mouthful, wasn't it? So that's moved by Councillor Cook, seconded by Councillor John Barnes. All those in favour? That's, again, is carried unanimously. Thank you very much, Stuart. Thank you very much, Adrian, for your work. Deborah as well. I suppose you can all go home. Thank you. Moving on, what have we got now? Asset disposal policy, pages 45 to 66. This is the head of housing and regeneration. Purpose of report, an introduction to the draft asset disposal policy and recommendation to Cabinet for approval and onward recommendation to full council. So it's come to us first for a quick look at, make sure we're happy. Joe, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. So the policy principally is intended as a tool for officers, really, to make sure that the procedures and processes that form part of the disposal are followed, first of all, but also followed in a consistent way and in an open and transparent way. It is quite a complex process to dispose of an asset in a local authority or any public body in terms of the need to demonstrate best value, which may not always be inconsistent with other values that we also value, such as economic, social, community values. So I think it's important to identify, just for context really, where the circumstances in which assets may be deemed surplus to council requirements. So they may not be consistent with our objectives. There may be cost-effective alternatives. There may be vacant parts to the site and are likely to be vacant for the future, in the near future. There may be other people providing services with those assets adequately elsewhere, and there may be an alternative of doing it more effectively with partnerships, for example. There may be the income relative to the expenditure of a lot of our assets may be unviable and not a good long-term investment. And there are others as well, I'm sure, we can think of. I do think it's important to highlight, though, that not most asset disposals, I'm sure, will be with some contention, because in most cases, and it's therefore important that the process we adopt is open and transparent and does provide a degree of objectivity in terms of how decisions are made. So in order to achieve that, we've done two things, or proposed two things. One is to provide a decision matrix which is in the Appendix A in more detail and is summarised in the report, which attempts to just quantify the sorts of aspects that would be weighed against the financial value of the asset. So the financial or economic case for the asset is the main principle, and sort of parent objective, but then there are the others that you can see in the report there, 5 or so, that we propose to equate evenly, to weigh against or alongside the financial aspects. So that's a point of substance. In terms of a point of process, we'll be redefining the property investment panel. And I have actually noticed, Chair, that I've neglected to change the name of the property investment panel to the property investment and disposal panel, which I suggest we amend before it goes to Cabinet. Try and get ahead of someone pointing that out, which is a fair point. And that we would increase the scope of that group, which was it's a very creaky table, was initially set up as part of the property investment strategy that was, I think Tony Leonard conceived of 2017, 2018, around there. And it was set up with the express delegations that were sought at committee at that time. There are no delegations for asset disposals. We tend to come to committee with them, again, because they're not particularly commonplace. I don't propose to set up at this stage any delegations for disposals, but again, because you could go with a value threshold, but then a public convenience, for example, may be of extremely low value and probably fail to meet those thresholds, but could be very contentious and would be something that members may want to have a view on. So the proposal is to take it to the panel of members that's in the Appendix B for familiarity, or to familiarise yourself with, and to take asset disposals there for that weighing to happen in a minuted meeting, which can then be brought to committee and a judgment made, or final decision made, I should say. But those are likely to come forward as business proposals, so it would be unlikely to be a disposal on its own. It will be a disposal in the context of where that money then needs to be reinvested, principally into repairs. So, for example, our colonnade on Bexhill Prom, for example, is in need of some restoration and reinvestment, and we may be coming forward with some proposed disposals to finance that. There's also later on the agenda this evening, you'll see in the budget papers, our capital programme, and one of the principal means of funding our capital programme is through capital receipts. So that's another synergy with this strategy. So, yeah, for discussion, just to remind you, this in the context of the Strategic Asset Management Plan, which is a plan, high-level plan on its own, but what will be coming forward are papers like this that form the meat of that plan and give us some sort of workable day-to-day means of having a better grip of the quality of our assets and the return on investment that we make from financial return on investment, but all those other community, etc., and those other softer outcomes on return on investment as well. So, yeah, happy to take questions, Chair.
Okie dokie, thanks, Joe. I'll go first with Councillor Clark by whisper.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to make it interesting. I'd like to come up with a specific item. When you're talking about getting rid of an asset, you're then thinking about getting an income from that asset or generating funds. Now the print work is now gone. That building has got all sorts of possibilities. I mean, in my view, we haven't got money to capitally spend a fortune of money on it at the moment. Wouldn't there be a case for leasing it out to companies for 2 years to get an income from rents, to get some sort of income from that? Or is there an idea of knocking that down and building something on it? Or is that asset management, or does it come onto your portfolio? I'm just looking at, we save money by getting rid of the print works, so to speak. So there we've got an asset. What do we do with it? Have we got any forward planning? Because there is potential for income there. It's rented out, or we haven't got capital money to spend on it as a site, have we? I just wondered if we've got any information on that.
So in general, with all of our assets, we would be taking a view, particularly when they become vacant, like the example you've used, to appraise that asset and look at options for leasing. So what would a revenue income look like on that asset? What do our agents and what would the market provide us with revenue income? What would the capital value of that be if we were to sell it in the market? And then we would be looking as a whole, as a part of our whole strategic planning, where are our priorities as a council, and which of those, in the assessment process, which of those provides us the best return on investment for whatever strategic objective we're prioritising. I think it is challenging though, because we're in a world of competing priorities as a council, and so there'll be competing things that people want to prioritise. But I would indicate that the financial position that the council's in is the most pressing and most urgent. So that would be the overriding decision criteria, and in that matrix it is therefore stands alone as the key consideration. So anything else is secondary. But then there's also, so by degrees, that means our capital programme, that means our revenue position, but that also means the fact that we've got other assets that really aren't an option to dispose of, particularly unless we want to go press the emergency buttons on things like our colonnade or the land gate at Rye or whatever it might be. So it's a complicated question, Charlie. Councillor, sorry. I've known you for a very long time, haven't I, Councillor? Sorry.
I'm saying is we need money now, we're short of money. I wouldn't like that building to stand empty for 2 years, nothing's getting done, when we could, a little bit of renovation, rent it out as offices and get some income. Because you won't get people to accept a 1 year deal, but they might accept 2. And we know the problem with finances. It could be very expensive to generate that site as a new site. I'm just looking, how on earth can we get some income in, That's all I'm saying.
I think we've got to be a bit careful here, Charlie, because I think we're sort of talking about a specific building now, but we are on the draft policy. I think I know where you're coming from. I know exactly where you're coming from, but I don't think we should sort of probably get bogged down with individual buildings. Councillor Legg.
Thank you, Chair. Joe, I understand clearly that disposal of assets is a contentious issue, and the council needs to get any benefit that it can from those assets. The Localism Act 2011 allows for disposal to other local authorities, I believe. And there's no mention of that in this policy. I wonder why that might be. Thank you.
We can certainly make reference to it. I mean, that ability is something we commonly are looking at, and we're presently looking at with a number of town councils and parishes, for example, in respect of public conveniences. So it's definitely a power we'd be looking to use. Yeah. So I would say it's more of a sort of means of disposal, isn't it, really? And a scenario that may present itself. So it wasn't deliberately left out, but it's not exhaustively. I suppose the aim of the policy isn't to exhaustively describe all the means by which we can dispose, I suppose. It's more the process that has to be followed, yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Chair. I better declare an interest, which I probably should have declared before, which is I'm a member of Bexhill Town Council, and you touched briefly, Joe, on something very close to my heart. But this is a more general question. The decision whether to dispose or not, and you've put the 20% given to 20% weighting given to each of the areas in which that might be relevant to that particular asset. Is there similarly flexibility in valuation to take into account the importance of the asset, I'm thinking of the social, the environmental impacts rather than just purely economic? I understand we've got to give very heavy weighting to economic, but my question really is there room for the valuation to be coloured by other things other than straightforward how much are the bricks and mortar worth?
Yes. In short, so in Appendix A at point 11, it describes the function of Section 123 of the Local Government Act, which exists for that very reason, Councillor. So it's looking to, when disposing of an asset, capture those values, and the Secretary of State does allow for us to do that in certain circumstances. But again, it's a complex process, which I think our lawyers have always been a bit nervous that we apply, in a rigorous way. So the policy really helps us and supports us to do that. Yeah.
Yes, I read with great interest, and I was just really underlining the fact that it's not set in concrete. We have got room, but needs must when the devil drives, presumably.
It does. There's a limit on. I think it's 2 million is the limit on that. Our ability to do that, but you can do.
Cool. Councillor Barnes, John.
Yes, I think it's quite useful to actually put our thinking down on paper and turn it into a policy. So I'm very grateful for that to be done. And clearly this will be developed over time in the light of experience. So any remarks we make at this moment may be overtaken by events. An important point which I wanted to make at the beginning, and I will move an amendment, is about the reporting of these decisions. I don't want to bring them back necessarily because I think the officer decision or the PAIP decision should normally stand. But if we don't know it's happened, then the possibility of challenge is not there. And I think, like any other executive decision, there should be a possibility of challenge, a possibility of calling. So I think that's an important change to the recommendations that I would like to see amended. When I come to the disposal matrix, we're really trying to balance other impacts against the financial benefit of the disposal. Whether one can put that in, Councillor Berman was implying almost you could create a formula around that. I'm not sure that's technically going to be feasible. It's one you may want to think about. But I look at the proposed criteria and you're going to score those probably on a scale of 1 to 5. I'm not quite clear, therefore, what we gain by additional weighting. You've suggested a fifth, a fifth, a fifth, and a fifth. If we're going to weight at all, you would only really weight, it seems to me, where it was likely to impact the scores. Therefore, you're most unlikely to arrive at 5 even weightings. And I think we would have to ask ourselves whether the cultural impact matters quite as much as the economic impact or the social impact. So that's for discussion, it seems to me, because the only gain of weighting is if you're going to alter those scores in light of that weighting. Otherwise, you're simply taking an aggregate and pitting that against the financial benefit or disbenefit. And of course, any disposal has an opportunity cost. And I think these are the criteria for the opportunity cost. You caught one other which crossed my mind, which is alternative uses for that land by the council over time. It's the only one which, in a sense, I wondered if that was worth scoring and bringing into your formula. But again, I don't want to press that tonight, just put it forward as a notion. My other worry is when we get to the PIP, where it seems to me we took a very deliberate decision that the opposition, whoever it was, should always be represented on the PIP. And the way we did it was to bring in the chairman of Scrutiny, who is constitutionally a member of the opposition. And it seems to me, therefore, we do need to alter those terms of reference. Say that the leader will nominate 5, and the 6th will always be the chairman of Overview and Scrutiny. And that, again, is a way of guaranteeing the transparency of the process. I think those are my comments, Chairman, but I will move that amendment with your permission.
Got a response to that one, Joe?
Yep. So my understanding, and Lisa will back me up, is that the delegation, and if every delegation that's exercised is published. So it should be caught there. Is that right?
Sorry, Joe, I thought my understanding was that they would be going on to Cabinet anyway, that the decisions of the PIP would then be ratified by Cabinet in the public domain.
This was your point on policy changes, Councillor. So on the policy amendments that I might use a delegation to amend the policy in future, there'll be there's a register of exercised delegations, as far as I understand. Is that, I assume that's published?
Well, the idea was for it not to go to Cabinet, otherwise I can't see why it's being delegated.
Yeah. So is it published, that register of us exercising delegations, or is that just kept for our own record?
The delegations that you've done from Cabinet decisions, where you've been delegated something to do from Cabinet, is published.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that should give us an indication. I think so. I think it's covered in short. That it occurred to me when he described it, because I agree with you. It is a anomaly that we would be going away and making merry changes to the policy. I could go and rewrite the whole policy, and as long as I can get Councillor Bayliss to agree, you may never know. That's your point, right, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, I don't want to hold up the delegation process.
Right, appreciate that. Yeah.
But if it were reported to Cabinet at the next Cabinet for information, and then that would open it up for scrutiny to call it in if they wanted to. That will probably be a good way of doing it. If I may close that, and also my minor change.
So that
My minor change to the terms of reference of the PIP.
I would just suggest that's quite a big corporate change. It doesn't just apply to this policy. So if you wish for all delegations and changes to, so all changes to policy where a delegation has been exercised to be, is already published, is what I'm trying to clarify. I'm sure
I'm happy if they're already published. I'm not sure I've had that assurance.
No, I may be wrong. That's why I was looking to Lisa. Sorry to put you on the spot, Lisa. Should we take that away? And on this report, I'm more than happy to make it. But I think what you're driving at is a bigger thing, Councillor.
I think what I can see where Councillor Barnes is coming from. So I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think you're talking about every delegation of every thing that officers do. You're just literally specific on assets that we, you know, you could be argued that we as ward members would need to know more if all of a sudden one of our public toilets disappeared off to some persons unknown without us knowing. That would be something, I'm assuming. So then
I think ward members actually are taken care of because they are consulted along the line. Quite what would happen if they differed is less clear. It's difficult without a specific example, but say we were to dispose of our interest in the leisure centre, that clearly will go to the PIP because it's more than £100,000. But say the ward member wanted to challenge, or Overview and Scrutiny wanted to challenge that, unless there is a report process and a possibility of calling written into the policy, that could be done by the PIP without reference to anybody else, as it's currently drafted.
Yeah, but I think the Property Investment Panel, they make a recommendation to the Cabinet from the previous few things I've sat in when there's been property purchases which have came up. So it works one way if you're purchasing, it works the other way if you're probably the same way if you're like getting rid of. But so my argument would be if it's comes from the Property Investment Panel or the Disposals Panel, if you like, referred to Cabinet make a decision. If I or you or a number of others don't like that decision, we can call in the decision of Cabinet.
At the moment, though, as I read the policy, correct me if I'm wrong, there are two issues here. Changes of policy, that's a quite separate issue, and decisions. As I read the policy, PIP would take the decision as they do with acquisitions at the moment. They don't recommend to Cabinet.
Yeah, I was describing Councillor Barnes's first point, which is around changes to policy, completely separate challenge for the council. If people are making changes to policy under a delegation, how does this group get to hear about it? So that's a question I would suggest for Lisa to go. Yeah, we can talk about that, can't we, outside? Because that's a bigger thing than just this paper. In terms of the process for decision making, there's no delegation to dispose of an asset anywhere. So everything has to come through committee. What I want as an officer, tactically, is to present this and allow members of this panel to do that. So it's not me and my surveyor coming forward and saying, we think, your cherished, whatever it might be, church hall or whatever it is, scout hut, is this score, without any member involvement in that process, because I don't feel as though it's a lot of these judgments are quite subjective. I think it's important to have objective scoring on there for transparency reasons, but they're very subjective, objective scorings. So I would like the Property Investment Panel to be there to work with us through that process, so that when it's presented to Scrutiny and Cabinet, it is, or to Cabinet rather, and Scrutiny can call it in, of course, they can see that it's had member involvement through that process.
I'm sorry to persist, Joe, but that isn't my understanding of what's on the paper in front of us. Effectively, we are talking now about actual disposals. Disposals under 100,000. I'm not saying purely officer because there is a member involved. The lead member for regeneration development will be always involved. Under 100,000, though, it's officer in conjunction with the lead member. Over 100,000, it's not cabinet, it's PIP. Now, how is that decision challenged? Say a ward member came to this committee. I want to challenge that decision. Say public toilets. How would we get involved if, in fact, the PIP has absolute authority? There's got to be a report and call-in process of some kind. 95% of the time we won't want to challenge, but that's 5% is maybe very big ones, or they may be very small ones, but they may rouse considerable passion.
Joe?
I am sorry, Councillor. I think maybe it's my writing of the paper, but that isn't the process as it's described. So we can talk about it offline, but there is no delegation being requested. It's not in the recommendations that we're asking for a delegation. So no powers are being delegated to any officer or panel. So the panel doesn't have any delegations, Chair. So it's...
So the PIP will always recommend a cabinet?
Yes.
Yeah, that's my understanding. The PIP always recommends the cabinet. It makes it, it's like a task and finish group, if you like. You know, the task and finish group does the work, and then it comes to us. We either say yes or no, or put it to bits or not, and then it goes on.
I should say, as if I misread the document, but
yeah, I think we're pretty good. I'll take Councillor Thomas in a minute. I've got a yellow hand up and a yellow outline I've been looking at for the last 20 minutes from Councillor Maynard. So, Carl.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I think that I've got bad echo. I'm gonna go off and go back in again.
You sound all right from where we are, so carry on.
Right, we'll carry on then. I think that there needs to be some context to this, because I certainly share some of Councillor Barnes' concerns, but I think that we also need to acknowledge that what should be at the heart of all this, in terms of how we interface with the public, in terms of all this, of course, is that transparency. And I'm sure Councillor Bayliss and every other councillor in the chamber would agree that when we dispose of any asset, there'll always be a degree of controversy. There'll always be a variety of opinions. And I think what's hugely important is that we use this exercise to absolutely drive that very, very core belief that we want to not only be transparent, but also engage with the public and indeed other parish town councils in any disposals that we may have. But I want to just lend a little bit of context to this, because I do think it's important to acknowledge that there is a political side to this, perhaps small p rather than big P, but in presenting reports in the past when we've talked about possible disposals, they have been at times focused on one area of the council's endeavours. So to give an example, Cemetery Lodge springs to mind. Time and again, I had to say, and I think others did as well, that we were foregoing a capital receipt to obviously set up the CIC, etc., by not simply selling Cemetery Lodge. So what my plea is when we have reports coming forward, is to have, and especially given the finances that we find, the financial situation rather that we find ourselves in, that we have papers that clearly give options and that clearly explain, especially when this does relate to a possible disposal, of what the sort of financial return that you could expect from a straight sale or a sale with some kind of legal caveat, just so that it's very much focused on the fact that we do have choices. Because I think at times in the past we've had papers come forward that are solely focused on a housing principle, forgetting perhaps that we are forgoing a capital receipt. And I think that I'm not saying necessarily that everybody would agree with me that perhaps we've not done the right thing in the past in terms of how we've presented reports, but I think that is hugely important. The other thing to say, I think, is that, and again, other members of Fleetingly talked about it, it's about the policy around freeholds and leaseholds. And again, I can be a bit specific there, because quite clearly that has been, and I'm sure Councillor Bayliss will be pulling her hair out on this one, it is that argument, there's no other way to put it, that we've had with parish and town councils around freeholds versus leaseholds. And I think as members, local members, we really do find it a bone of contention, whatever our opinion on that might be, but a bone of contentions where, for example, in Settlescombe, in my ward, we've still got public conveniences that are empty because we just seem to have reached this impasse on where we're going with the disposal of public conveniences. So I guess a fundamental question, and I have to ask it in public session today, is, are we really being, is this a political lead or is this a legal argument that we are so fixated as a council with keeping these freeholds? Because it does seem to me that we really need to break this logjam that we've got in terms of negotiating with those parish and town councils, and frankly anybody else who's interested in taking on assets that clearly cost us a lot to maintain for the longer term. But it is a sort of embarrassment out there in Settlescombe when we've still got facilities that are shut as a result of the decisions that we've made. So we really do need to move that on. And if this is a policy is an opportunity now to out this as a fundamental issue, because I do think there needs to be greater member interface if it indeed centres upon a legal argument. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I think I can agree with you there on, especially on the sort of public conveniences where we sort of look at something and you think, well, it's a millstone around their neck. Some of them, they're closed. We have parish council sort of and we offer them a leasehold. Then we wonder why they walk away. Freehold to get rid of them. So,
could I ask Joe? I'm very grateful to the Vice Chairman who has now found the passage which troubling me. If you read paragraphs 26 and 27, there are decisions there that are left entirely to the head of paid service to determine whether it should go to the relevant committee in 27. And in 26, the head of paid service again, absolute delegation, shall determine if that matter will be referred to committee. I trust our head of paid service, but this is total delegation.
Andrew, do you want to answer that one? Or do you want to answer that one, Joe?
Sorry, the language is unhelpful. I will change that and extract that from the papers. What it's driving at, and I was rereading it, not at 27, because it says the same thing higher up as well. It's 16. What it's driving at is that there is no delegation. So it's saying they will exercise that delegation. It's a genesis of a conversation had that we may wish to, at a future date, come back. It actually speaks to your first point, to the Councillor's first point, that if we did in the future ask for delegations, we wouldn't need to change the policy. But if you read the policy as it's termed, it assumes there are delegations, which there are not. So it's extremely unhelpful language. I'll take that reference to delegations out, and it will read that it's just has to go to Cabinet. So I do apologise, Councillor. The language is confusing, but I would argue that it assumes there is a delegation, which there is not. to reassure you. But I understand the language is unhelpful, so I'll take it out.
Just as well as come to scrutiny first, won't it, not cabinet. Right, I've got Councillor Bayliss somehow has got two hands up. So she must be really important, or she's pressed the button twice. And Councillor Maynard's got one hand up, whether that's a legacy or not, I don't know. So Councillor Bayliss, and then I'll go to the Chairman of Council. Councillor Bayliss, over to you.
Right, so yes, thank you. I think it's because Councillor Maynard hadn't lowered his hand, which he has done now, so I've only got one hand up. I mean, I actually agree completely with Councillor Maynard and yourself about the freehold and leasehold questions. And as I understand it, we've got a change of policy regarding that coming to Cabinet the next meeting. I don't know if Joe can perhaps expand on that. But that's definitely an area that I know right across the council we are keen to make sure that we can actually sell the freeholds to various different bits of assets that we need to devolve down to parish council. So I wanted to clarify that we're actually all on the same page. And in relation to the paper itself, I think, I can see now where Councillor Barnes is coming from, and very happy to endorse the changes that Joe has proposed.
Okie dokie. Right, Councillor Thomas, Chairman of Council.
Thank you, Chair. Like Councillor Bayliss, I think there's Councillor Maynard that raised some very interesting points as you did. And I think it might be an idea for the document to address some of those explicitly, because I don't think it necessarily follows that you have to do freehold all the time or leasehold all the time. There may be specific cases where one or the other is preferable, and maybe we'll get advice from auditors on that, from legal on that, from surveyors on that, etc. So I think that may be something to be said for setting forth the arguments around those points. And also, Councillor Bayliss referred to selling assets. Of course, this could be every bit as controversial as freehold versus leasehold, because the town council would like the district council to sell it assets at £1 a time. Now, it may be that our auditors are not that keen on that. And so there may be arguments to be put about that as well. So I think some setting forth of these issues would be useful. I think also it would be very useful to set forth who we are going to consult about all this, because I don't think there's any mention of consulting vital stakeholders. And by the way, at this point I should declare that I'm the brother represented on the museum. Now, this is one of the proposals that's actually in the CUTS document, which has come out today, a proposal that the museum might be devolved to the town council. But what does the museum think about that? Now, I think that's an important question. We need to make sure the document actually enshrines the rights of stakeholders to express an opinion about proposals that are being made, and also the wider community. I think something needs to be included about how we're going to consult, because if we think about how the toilet issue was actually handled, I don't think there are many people in this room who would claim that it was ideal. Okay? And I think I could quote some other councils that had a great deal more consultation about this, and as a consequence were able to carry their public with them to a greater extent. So something about who we consult and how we're going to consult them. And finally, members. How are we going to consult members about all these things? How are we going to make sure that this committee is able to say something about this? All those things. And one last point, I think it would be good to develop a protocol for our way of working with all the town and parish councils agreed with them. So there are principles on which we work when we negotiate with these people. So we don't just do it on a one-off basis when we're discussing toilets or whatever, but we have a good regular relationship with our town and parish councils. So there is a process of exchange of ideas on a more professional basis between this council and the other councils. So I think that if the Local Government Association believes in that kind of protocol, there's a great deal to be said for it. So I would say that would be a very good addition to this excellent document that Joe has written. Thank you, Chair.
Joe, you want to come back?
Yeah, there's the policy has a section on consultation with the public at points 28 and 29. So do please, yeah. I mean, I won't read them now.
More
but
about how it should be done, Joe. What's going to be
yeah. Well, we have a duty to do it with certain assets, and it's a statutory duty to consult. It's the sale of public open space, for example, and we have to advertise that in local newspapers, etc. So that's a statutory obligation. Of course, we'll be consulting with ward members when it affects their ward, with the property investment panel, which will be cabinet members, and we do rely quite heavily on members speaking to each other about business that's coming forward. With regards to freehold versus leasehold, this policy is completely agnostic about that. That doesn't sit in council in statutory policy. That's an adopted policy of this council to offer leaseholds. So I understand that the process adopted offers those leaseholds. It's not something I'm familiar with personally, having not been part of that work. But my understanding is that all parishes were offered leaseholds, and if those are refused, they will be offered out to market as an existing use value on a freehold, and parish councils are free to purchase those if they wish. That's my understanding of the adopted policy.
Can I just come back?
Well, hang on a minute. I've got the chief executive has got a hand up, so we're hear from the boss, shall we? Lorna.
Thank you, Chair. Just to be clear, the policy that we're talking about wasn't an asset one at all. It was about protecting the service. So the consultation that we did was, what laws do we need to keep open, which ones should close, and actually that was a success. We changed our mind based on what that feedback was. So we're moving, I think, out of the protecting discretionary services side of things into what we do with our assets. So I think that's a fundamental change. I just wanted to make a comment about what Councillor Thomas was saying about our protocol with parish and town councils. Is there a lot of feedback? I can hear myself twice, but
no, you're
just
fine.
Just checking.
Yeah,
you're good. Okay. We have rank, and we have an annual conference with our parishes. And I know I'm really keen that we improve things, but I think there's a basis there to work on. So David Young, who's chair of RALC, is very keen that we improve how we've been working together. The communication that we've kind of achieved does need to be improved, but we've got a basis there to work on. So it's far beyond this particular thing that we're discussing this evening around our assets. But I do think, look into the future. That's something we can build upon. And early engagement, I think, is where we've made a mistake in the past. So that's something we can definitely improve. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Just to come back quickly. I mean, the Chief Exec there very rightly talks about the importance of early engagement. That's the sort of principle I would like to see in a protocol. So we clearly set out what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, what we're promising we're going to do. We could promise, for example, that we're going to give timely notice of any changes. We can promise that we're going to have full disclosure during the negotiations. We can, I think, set out the principles on which we're going to do it. And I think that's very important, because the way in which these discussions go with local councils can often be not merely contentious, but I'm sorry to say the actual way in which it's conducted can be very adversarial. So I think a protocol that would set out that we're going to do it in a spirit of partnership, not in a spirit of opposing each other. To set out the atmosphere, if you like, in which these negotiations would be a very useful thing. And it's something which the Local Government Association is keen on, and I've also seen some research on this suggesting that's a good way forward. But in relation to what Joe had to say, I'd like to see much more consultation about options, because what's actually happened with the toilets, we had this sort of policy, we had a tremendous kickback, and then we modified the policy. Far better, I think, to have consulted the public beforehand, say, well, here are some possibilities. We could close this number of toilets, we could keep them open, we could keep them all open for 6 months, or we could close half of them for half the year or whatever. We could kind of put options to the public. Would you want to see toilets a paid-for service, etc.? We can put options to the public. And some other county councils have done this. And I think as a consequence, people feel they're more consulted, which I think a very large part of the kickback we got out of the public toilets was a sort of feeling that we just made up our minds and didn't take into account people's feelings. So I think much more consultation is very important to this whole process. And I think people need to understand that because of the financial problems of district and other principal councils, sooner or later there's going to be a choice that either town and parish councils take over the services or the services will die. And I don't think that point has come across at all to the general public, leave alone to many parish and town councils. And I think we need to make this point repeatedly until everybody understands just how bad the financial crisis faced by principal councils is and what the implications of it are.
I think we're slightly off the agenda right there, maybe, but now
I suggest
conscious of time, so
the following wording on 3, instead of the and there, subject to the development of a satisfactory proposal for the reporting and, where necessary, challenge of that recommendation. I think Lisa's got the gist of that. On 4, it will be subject to the Chairman of Overview and Scrutiny having a standing place on the PIP. So moved, Chairman.
did you get that, Lisa? Did a better job than what I did. Did you understand that, Joe?
I would benefit from it being repeated.
Who wants to repeat that? Right, okay. Right, officer recommendation, resolve that. 1, the draft asset disposal policy be recommended to Cabinet and full Council for approval and formal adoption. And I'm assuming that Councillor Bayliss, who is the Cabinet member and has sat in on this and listened to this lengthy debate, gets a gist of where we're coming from. And if she wants to make any adjustments to it before it goes to Cabinet, then fine. The asset disposal matrix criterion indicative weighting be noted. Yeah. Then 3, it be recommended to Cabinet and full Council for approval that authority be delegated to the Head of Housing Regeneration to make updates and change the asset disposal policy as required in consultation with the portfolio holder for regeneration and economic development. So that was the one you changed.
That recommendation subject to the development of process. That's the word I'm hunting for. Development of process for the reporting of such decisions, with the possibility of challenge where appropriate.
Right. So we've tidied that up nicely. And 4, the necessary amendments to the property investment panel terms of reference be recommended to Cabinet for approval to basically include the Chairman of Scrutiny.
That's subject to the opposition on the PIP being reserved for the Chairman of Scrutiny.
Yep. Happy with that? Moved by Councillor Barnes, seconded by Councillor Cook.
Happy to second that.
You seconded. Councillor McGirt was slightly confused, but whatever. Just his general demeanour. So, so if we're happy with that, this is the recommendation to Cabinet, whenever that is. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Thanks, Joe. Item 7, oh, we've done that, thank Christ. Item 8, revenue budget capital monitoring programme monitoring 24-25, month 5, pages 67. 67. Report of Deputy. Try again. Deputy Chief Executive. Purpose of report, note the financial position and forecast outturn for 25-23.
Thank you, Chair. So this report is an update to the report that I brought here for month 2, which was the end of May, so this is now end of August figures, and there's been very little actual change on the revenue side since month 2. The forecasts have proved to be fairly accurate. I'll briefly go through the things causing the 900,000 overspend to this date. Main ones include interims in various departments. Hopefully they will begin to be wound down as we replace them with permanent staff during the year. Cabinet approved the new capital development team. And then we have people like HR officers and finance officers. Certainly in the finance side, those interims, one has already left and one will be going in the next few weeks. In terms of planning, the new interim head of planning has identified that there's a lot of pent-up demand for planning. Across the country, apparently, it's been a very bad year for planning applications generally, at record lows, but she does expect that demand to be released at some point. What we don't know is if that demand will be released before the end of the financial year or not. So in terms of looking forward to the budget, I'm not planning to adjust planning fee income next year for that reason, because we do expect it to pick up again. It's just whether it will improve the financial situation in this year in time or not. However, the other sort of fee deficit in terms of car parking is obviously heavily, especially at Cambo, is heavily weather related. We've had a couple of relatively poor summers now, and I think we do have to revise our assumptions on income figures for car parking going forward and assume worse weather than we may have assumed in the past. So there will be longer term budget adjustments to reflect that decrease in income. In terms of housing, homelessness, this is a national issue. If we're going to get any government assistance at all with finances next year, and we're completely in the dark about that at the minute, as are all councils, that might be the area where district councils get some help, whether in additional grants, may not be permanent adjustments to base, but that is a massive national issue. Districts have lobbied very heavily. Some of our neighbours have lobbied very heavily and led lobbying groups. We are relatively, although it is a big increase in expenditure compared to most other councils, we are getting off fairly lightly at the minute in terms of this overspend. So it's a massive national issue. I would expect some response from the government on this in due course. So they're probably the major revenue overspends or deficits in income. Where there is a significant change in this report from month 2 is on the capital side. So Duncan has been working on reviewing the capital programme since he changed roles earlier in the year. We did have a headline budget 5-year programme of £250 million on the capital side, £250 million for an authority with a sort of £14-15 million revenue budget. That would send red flags to auditors and government and things like that in terms of our ability to actually borrow. Some of the borrowing predictions were quite heavy in terms of that. The match funding for LUP and LUF, the borrowing generally was, £100 million plus. Well, 100 million currently would cost £7 million a year to service, in terms of 5 million interest charges and 2 million minimum revenue provision. We cannot afford that level of borrowing going forward. So what Duncan and Lloyd and others have been doing is reviewing the entire capital programme. They are bringing down the future spend. Of that 250, obviously about 50 has already been spent, but the future 200 is now provisionally coming down to around 120 million. The percentage of that is borrowing is significantly lower than it was at the start of the year. Also, each scheme needs to wash its own face in terms of if we are borrowing, that scheme has got to have a new business case in which the income from that scheme will offset the borrowing, because there is no room in the revenue budget to increase borrowing at all at the minute, to be quite frank. So that sort of schemes will have new business cases, and they will only go forward if they wash their face financially and have that financial return. So the borrowing has come down to 120 million. The other factor, so there's a couple of schemes in this report that we're no longer viable in their present state. So the supermarket scheme and an aspect of the GP scheme, but not the GP, not the surgery itself. They're listed in the report. The major factor bringing it down is the good news at Blackfriars and the work done by the housing company where they no longer need £80 million set aside in the capital programme, because we've now got the affordable housing element, which means we will sell 2/3 of the houses to the registered provider. And that, as well as the good news in terms of the affordable housing, it has very good news in terms of capital cash flow as well, that we don't need to borrow anywhere near as much money. So that's come down to sort of less than 20 million from 80 million. And that's the major change in the capital programme going forward. There'll be far more information on this in the draft budget in a few weeks' time, but that is the major change since month 2. Happy to take any questions.
Yeah, and there was an additional grant we got as well.
Yeah, there's been good news in terms of HIF and grant and things like that as well for the road.
Yeah, okay. So we got a recommendation here. The first one is the new Lloyds CardNet banking contract. I understand this has been bounced around for a while.
It's been out to tender and it's all fully approved. It just needs cabinet approval ultimately.
Yeah, so
that's why it's in the report.
So the new banking contract, the cost of £41,000 per annum on the basis of an 8-year contract, 2 + 2 + 2 + 2 years, the total estimated contract value of £328,000. 2, the updated capital programme financing requirements be recommended to full council for approval, as Andrew's just said, and that the report be noted. Any questions, Councillor Barnes?
Yes, I don't know how you want to handle this, whether you want to split between discussing the current position and the capital position. I'll discuss the capital to begin with, but I would like to come back and just ask a question on the current. On the capital position, I think what's been done is extremely sensible. I congratulate the Deputy Chief Executive and his predecessor on the enormous amount of work that's gone into this. And the revenue implications are extremely welcome. The one question on the capital programme I had, which I wasn't very clear on, is whether we've managed to offload King Offer to someone else, or whether this will still be a Rother project. I don't know whether you want to answer that tonight or do it outside the meeting.
I think I'll be coming back next month with the draft capital programme going forward, so we'll probably have a debate on the full capital programme next time round. Yep.
I won't post that one tonight. But really, this is the way the capital programme should go forward in the future, with properly costed business plans. To have a sum of 60 million unallocated floating around in the capital programme was clearly not a very sensible position to have got ourselves in. Coming back to the current, I think the important thing for this committee is how much of the unplanned overspend, as opposed to the planned overspend, is going to be self-rectifying, in other words, largely one-off, and how much needs to be fed into the base budget. And I don't know whether Andrew has any feel for that as yet. Clearly, our reserves are still in a reasonably healthy state, but if we were to go on losing $500,000 a year, then we will be getting within sight of the position no one wants to go to. So I'm trying to get a feel for what the base budget is likely to be, as opposed to what it is at the moment. We've got the pay rises, I think, largely fed in, and we've got part of the overspend which will have to go into the base budget for pay rises. But beyond that, I'm much less clear how much that 900,000 is likely to be recurrent.
Yeah, so the main item that will affect the budget, as I said earlier, is the car park income. So I think the budget was over this year, and possibly in previous years, been over optimistic in terms of the income. As I said earlier, it's hoped that the planning fees will recover. So there's two aspects to that. One is the amount of activity. It's been at record lows, but as I said, Gilly are now interim head of planning is telling me that there's a lot of pent-up demand and that dam should burst fairly soon, certainly in time for next year. The other factor we've got in next year's budget is the government's proposals to double household planning fees. So that will be taken into account in the budget as well. Big issue is homelessness. That will be a pressure on next year. As I said earlier, I'm hoping the government is going to do something about that nationally, and we may get some extra funding for that. If we're going to get extra funding for anything, that will be the one. That's the interims. I would expect a lot less pressure from interims as permanent staff are taken on. Even planning, we're going through a process at the minute, so we should be interviewing for a permanent head of planning next week and things like that. So that pressure should drop. So most of these items will fall out. There'll be other things that will potentially replace them. So the big item in the budget that we'll get onto in the next report is one of the big savings item is investment income. But that is because we've got the LUP and LUF money sitting in the bank account. Over the next couple of years, that will get spent, hopefully. And that means the sort of best part of £1 million we've got from investment income will need to be replaced by other savings. So that is probably the biggest medium-term financial plan pressure. And again, I'll be bringing that to the next meeting where that will become apparent in across the 5 years of the medium-term financial plan.
Someone want to move it? No, I've got stunned silence. So who wants to move the recommendation? This is resolved that Cabinet be requested to consider that things. Councillor McGurk?
I move it.
Thank you. Councillor Burns seconded. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you very much. Item 9, page 81 to 88, Savings Assurance Report. This is the new report that Andrew's been threatening to bring forward. What do we got here? Purpose of the report, to assure members that savings are on course to be delivered in line with the proposals set out in the 24-25 budget. Resolve that report be noted. Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. This is a good news report in that specifically on the savings that were in the budget, about 60% are rated green, so they're already achieved or very clear that they're going to be achieved. 1.5 million of the 2.5 million. A lot of that is the investment income that I just referred to from the previous report. Best part of £1 million are rated amber. That indicates that either further actions are required or that it's just too early to tell if they're income related, whether we're going to get the full year saving or not. So that's where officer actions are most focused now for the rest of the year in achieving those amber savings. And sadly, the car park savings of 125,000, as I mentioned earlier, due to the weather, are not going to be achieved. So they have now moved into the red category. But on the whole, compared to previous years, where I think only 15% of savings were achieved in the previous programme, to already have 60% locked in and most of the rest of the 40% reasonably on target is a lot better performance than previous years. And both this and the budget challenge sessions we've done in the run-up to the budget, I think have focused officers' minds much more on actually achieving these savings. And this particular process keeps their mind focused on them all year round. So they don't think budget done and then forget about it. So this has really focused minds on delivering the savings that people have promised. And we plan to repeat this next year in terms of the savings that we've got quite a successful long list of savings that we'll be coming back with next month. And again, we will monitor those in a similar way next year to make sure they're delivered as well. Thank you.
Happy with that? Councillor Barnes?
Just wonder whether we're getting into a vicious circle on green bins. I don't know whether Andrew's looked at that one. We keep pushing the fees up and then the uptake goes down. And that seems to be an area that possibly has proved counterproductive.
I believe last year they raised green bins to match some of the neighbouring authorities. It's quite a large increase, but compared to neighbouring authorities, and certainly where I live, it's a similar sort of figure. I don't think there's much scope to increase them drastically anymore. We are fairly close to meeting the target for renewals that we need to meet. We may have to do a little bit of marketing across the winter for sort of half a year for half the fee sort of stuff, but we're fairly close to the target. But yeah, it has been raised. It will only probably go up by inflation in future. Yeah.
It's very nice to meet neighbouring authorities, but we are not a particularly rich income place, rather. Very low wages. Countryside a bit richer, but we still have large numbers of houses in the countryside where they're below, well, they're 60% below the national average income, and therefore below the poverty level. And they may be some of the houses that are. Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Chair. So it's actually we're talking about the brown bin or the green waste bin. It's a bit anyway. It is one of the increases. Residents still comment to me about their dissatisfaction of that, and obviously, I give them the reason that we are comparable to other local areas. I think that when we consider next year, maybe the optimum a second green bin at a reduced price may be an option that we could attract people to have a second bin where they can, would be something to explore. And my second other comment was about car parking and the fees generated. We did mention earlier about active travel. If ever we get some real buy-in or opportunities, say, from East Sussex to really get active travel really up and running, you know, the parking is going to change in coming years of the income that we can expect to generate other than the weather. I suspect, I hope. I only hope in relation to people being more active, not the loss of income from this authority.
We get your drift. Councillor Clark, Charlie.
Just a quick point, regarding the garden waste bins, it may be too early, but in financial terms, if you say we increase the garden waste bins by whatever it was, £20 and you calculate the sum you think you're going to get in, because you think that the same number of people are going to have bins, we need to know how many people then didn't renew to see what the impact was, the customer resistance to the increase. It's still cheaper than Hastings, because my daughter lives in Hastings, I think it's 60 odd quid, I think. No, more than that, 90s on. Anyway, so we need to know at the end of the year how much customer resistance there was to that increase. And the trouble is, that a lot of my neighbours, they put the grass cuttings in a black bin, in a bin line, and chuck it in the black bin, you know, and so it's all contaminated. So, you know, people would do that because they don't want to pay the fee, you know. So it'd be interesting to know what percentage of the increase we thought, but we didn't get because there was customer resistance to the taking on the new charge.
Councillor Cook.
Councillor Burton stole my comment.
Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to comment on the report in general. I wonder how many other councillors have this level of visibility on the financial state and the financial operation of their authority. I think officers have been really to be commended in buying into this process, not trying to squirrel away, we'll put this bit onto this accounting line and this bit over here. It's been a real drill down, and I think we can have confidence in that report. We can have confidence when we're told we're on track to turn amber into green, there's been an honest appraisal of why one of them was red. I think there are councillors who give their councillors who give their eye teeth to have this level of visibility, and therefore, by implication, this level of control over what are essentially operational matters. We try and stay away from operational matters, but this is really giving us confidence that the ship is in good hands and going in the right direction. So thank you to officers.
Well, I think you're right. Andrew's responsible for it ultimately. He when he sort of came to the council, he said, this is what I'm going to do. So we knew it was sort of coming, and this is what's come. So well done to Andrew for doing it.
I think I agree with Councillor Byrne. It reflects great credit really on the officer team.
Oh, yeah.
So I do think we need to find a warmer word than simply noting.
We'll welcome it then. We'll welcome it. I think it's good. You could argue it puts pressure on officers, but ultimately at the end of the day, we've got to save the money. So if it's sort of looked at and it's just part of the thing. I know Lisa's always sending us emails. Don't come over here unless you have to. There we are. So no, I think it's across the board. Everybody's done well, and it's welcome. So resolved that the report we welcomed. That's moved by Councillor Cook, seconded by Councillor Barnes. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Thanks, Sir Andrew. Right, item 10, 98, 89. Right, impact of Airbnb second homes in Canberra, Ryan, Winchelsea, establishment of a task and finish group. Eastern Ryan, Winchelsea, to consider whether to carry out an overview and scrutiny review of the issues impact of Airbnb second homes in Canberra, Ryan, Winchelsea. Be resolved that members consider whether to undertake a overview and scrutiny review into the impact of Airbnb second homes in Canberra, Ryan, Winchelsea, and if so, appoint a task and finish group to agree its terms of reference in November meeting. So I think what we've got here. Now, I've sort of been thinking about this. I sent an email out to everybody earlier. I had Councillor Legg and Councillor Jimmy Stranger come back and said we would be interested if required, which seems ironic because they're miles away from Eastern Rother and Ryan, Winchelsea. But I then sort of considered, well, is this an issue that covers everybody? In Bexhill, in Battle, out in the sticks in Robertsbridge and Burwash and that. But then I had an email from the chair of the Rye Chamber of Commerce and Councillor McGurk has as well, and he's been working closely with the Rye Chamber. Now they're doing a bid. It's called a bid, isn't it? And they have some levelling up money. So then I'm going back, well, should we keep it localised to Rye and Eastern Rother to see how it works? Instead of trying to go district-wide and almost making ourselves a massive bit of work, do we sort of sow the seed, if you like, in Rye and Eastern Rother, see how it works, see if we can actually get to the, is there a problem, is there not a problem, see what goes on, and then, if we need to, we can say, well, we'll do the same for Battle, we can do the same for Bexhill, we can do the same for Northern, Robert, and everything else. So if that's sort of an agreement with the committee that we stay where we are, Eastern Rother and Ryan, Winchelsea, to start with, then we can agree a terms of reference at the November meeting. Councillor McGurk, I'll leave it to you to work with the Chamber of Commerce to sort of work up. I suppose we could have them on. We can have outside people either come and give expert we can get expert witnesses in, or we can have people as part of the group. So yeah, I don't mind. I think if myself and the two RAI members, we can make up the group. That's where we are, aren't we? Ultimately, no one else wants to make up a group. They do their own thing in 6 months' time, maybe. So, so I think if we go down that route, we can ask the chamber. If the chamber say yes, can we be part of the group, then fine. We can have that, but we have their expert knowledge as well. And then from sort of providers, if you like, I know a couple of people, 3 people, maybe 4, who are, you know, providers of Airbnbs in Rye and hotel accommodation, whatever. So we can get a sort of a cross section and get them in as expert witnesses. So if that's the route you want to take, then I'm happy to do that. Anything you want to say, Simon?
Thanks, Chair. I think that sounds like a really positive, practical way forward. And you're right. I've met with the Chamber of Commerce a few times about this, and they. So I mean, I think we're really benefiting Rye from a really, as you will know, very engaged, practical, knowledgeable Chamber of Commerce, and their lead on hospitality is responsible for you know, one of the main hotels in Rye. Also met with him, had a coffee today, talked it over. They're really keen to be as involved as possible, including, if possible, you know, members of the Task and Finish group. And I think another thing which makes that really valuable for this group, for this purpose, is that they, as you mentioned, they're already undergoing this bid, the Business Improvement District process, and part of that is a feasibility study which they're doing. And what may happen as a result of the feasibility study is that Rye may become an accommodate. I think it's called an accommodation and business improvement district, which by the process of what they're doing at the moment, the feasibility study, they will gather lots of really useful data and information and connections as part of that process. So they will do a lot of this work on behalf of the Task and Finish group or alongside the Task and Finish group. So I think then it will be up to us to look at what ways the district council and the town council can add value to this process and what we want from it, working with the Chamber of Commerce, because they will have some outcomes which will affect things like what may become a tourist tax for the town or not. So that would be a really useful relationship. I don't know whether the town council would be interested in joining the Task and Finish group as well, or to join as part, in the specific meetings. But yeah, I think that sounds great.
Councillor Bayliss, you've got your hand up, number 1 hand.
Yeah, thanks ever so much. I mean, I similarly have received communications from Rye Chamber of Commerce. I'm actually the representative of the council on Rye Chamber of Commerce. I think I was allocated to be the representative because of the work that obviously we've been doing on economic development over there, and they have been in touch with me. I mean, it's quite interesting because I think in our budget proposals for next year, we maybe, Andrew might be able to say something about this, that we are considering double taxation, double council tax for empty homes, and potentially some of the Airbnb properties would fall into that. At the moment, they don't. A lot of Airbnbs do not pay or are not registered for business rates, and of course the bid proposals that Rye Chamber are currently consulting on at the moment, or hoping to consult on at the moment, would levy a sort of overnight tax on visitors to Rye to help, pay for the business improvements that they want to make. But that would not apply to Airbnbs that were not business rated. So only business rated properties would fall into this. So I'm quite interested from the economic development perspective, and also how that would apply. I think we can take, if you like, a case study of Easton Rother and Ryan Winchelsea, and use that to develop some ideas or some conclusions. But we also have a big problem with Airbnb in Bexhill as well, where we've had people evicted from properties in the town centre, for example, which are now Airbnbs. So I think the lessons can be applied to the whole of Rother if we think of it in those terms when we're setting it up. What have we learnt in Rye and Winchelsea and Easton Rother that applies across? How would that impact also on our budget for next year, and how would it impact on Rye Chamber's business improvement, their bid process, and how that will work? So that's. I wholeheartedly support it, and really pleased to see local councillors develop this and bring it forward.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Barnes.
Yes, it's a complicated area because I'm trying to define in my own mind what are the problems, and in a way the evidence goes both ways. There's no doubt Airbnb is having a very significant impact, and probably an adverse impact, both on the normal lettings market, but also on our homelessness problem. So that's one area that the problem is reasonably clear. But in other areas, the evidence is very odd, because what we're finding is our homelessness crisis is leading to some pressure on holiday accommodation and on caravan accommodation to actually become all the year-round accommodation for people who aren't in a normal house or can't afford a normal house. So is the tourist sector our major problem, or is the housing and the pressures on housing the major focus of our investigation? I simply ask the question because it seems to me we need to be very clear what we're trying to resolve here, and policy needs to be directed with some view to what the problem is. And sorry, I've raised more doubts than I can answer.
I think you could argue that's the job of the Task and Finish group to find out. But I know it's ironic. I converted 2 very tiny flats with a friend of mine into 2 holiday lets, 2 Airbnbs, of which his daughter runs, so she earns a living, and he supplements his retirement. But he had them rented out full time before, but people would only ever stay there for 4 to 6 months because they was too small to live in. Equally, opposite, 200 yards up the road from my house is a 4 or 5 bedroom house, which, on a weekend, 6-7 cars would turn up, and people would be paying £800 a night to stay in this place. And I know when they leave because a blasted burglar alarm goes off in the middle of the night. So, it's different. And then I've had people I know who have sort of come to me. Some of you know I'm a landlord. Come to me and say, "Got anything empty, Paul? Because I've just been given notice on my house. I've been living there for 10 years, and the chap's given me notice, given me 3 months to get out because he wants to do holiday lets. You know, these are people living in town, working in town, you know, people servicing the tourism sector, being kicked out of their house to try and find somewhere else, which is almost impossible because everybody's gone into holiday lets. You know, and I'm not just talking, you know, if it's a small flat, then fine, I don't really bother about that. But, you know, when you've got 3-bedroom semis and terrace houses and everything else, where people used to start their property, you know, rise up the property ladder from, and they can't get in the first rung because they're all holiday lets, then you get to a stage of you've got oversaturation. It's a difficult one. So perhaps we work on it. Simon, you want to come back?
Yeah, thanks. Just to say, absolutely agree. It's a complex issue with many drivers, and you know it's completely related to housing. But I think one of the outcomes we need to get to as a district council is how can we control levels of second homes and Airbnbs in given streets or areas, and you know the point that Councillor Bayliss raised: how do we raise revenue against them, whether it's by additional council tax or business rates or whatever it is. So I think that is the issue. You know, I was talking to someone today, I think on Mermaid Street, there's probably only 2 houses with permanent residents in Rye. And that is an issue for any town. And I think it's particularly acute in Rye and Winchelsea. But as you say, the points can be extrapolated, I think, across the district. But I think it's really important that we don't make assumptions, that we understand it with an open mind, because, you know, there's plenty of local people making a few bob with an Airbnb, and that's their pension pot. Well, you know, that's different to people owning several properties and whole streets becoming sort of deserts of permanent residents, and that affects a town. And equally, you know, we welcome tourists in, we want to promote and welcome and make the most of the experience for tourists, and it's getting that balance right. And that's why it's important to have a balanced, well-informed task and finish group who approach it with an open mind.
Yep, so I think we're in agreement with that. Terry, quickly.
I'm going right back to the start. Are we going to set up a task and finish group? And I think from around the table, we all have a certain amount of information. We don't know that at the end of a task and finish group, we would have any legal instruments that could impact it. So we'd know what the problem was a bit more. We may have different opinions on the pluses and minuses. But to set up a task and finish group is really quite expensive on officer time. You know, building heating and all of it. I've never looked at I would be curious to know just how much a task and finish group costs throughout its lifetime. And the other thing is, I'm not too sure the timing is right. This is a well-acknowledged problem nationwide. And I think there have already been some murmurings from government that something has to be done. And it's going to be something to do with tax legislation, or even building regulations and requiring any Airbnb person, any Airbnb accommodation to come up to a certain level, or maybe they'll have a national inspectorate of some sort. But all of these are way above our pay grade. We could spend a lot of time defining what the problem is, understanding that there are pluses and minuses, and at the end of it still not saying, well, there's nothing, we know what the problem is, but there's nothing we can do about it. So I'm not too sure this is the time to spend this sort of money on a task and finish group.
Wow, dissent in the ranks, eh? Councillor Cook.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, Terry, totally disagree. I think this is the perfect time to do it. I think we've got some very willing people that are willing to do it. We've got an enthusiastic Chamber of Commerce who is willing to do it. They've obviously got the support of Councillor Bayliss, and I think it's an admirable thing to do. And I think once they've done it, then I think we involve Bexhill Town Chamber of Commerce, Battle Chamber of Commerce, because it's right the way across the district. I mean, even in Burwash, there must be lots of houses that do Airbnb. And I think we need to decide, you know, is this a negative or is it a positive? So I think if people are willing, I think we should accept their offer. And yes, we should move forward with the Task and Finish group based in Rye, Winchelsea and Eastern Rother. Thank you.
You will, because you'll be on it. John.
I like the way Councillor Cook has phrased it. If we go in saying, is it overall a plus on balance or overall a minus, I think that's quite an interesting question to ask. And it probably would be valuable. All the policy instruments are not in our hands, but we do have council tax and business rates are both within our hands. So I would have thought that we have some instruments. We may not have enough.
You're not you're tourism councillor Timpey, are you? Do you want to put your 10 pence worth in, or are you happy to sit quiet?
Yeah, I had a look at this, and I suppose the Task and Finish group will have to look at the wealth of statistics that's already out there that the government has done as late as May. And the previous government was proposing a national register and was proposing changes in planning law. Now that's sort of come to a halt, and I think it would be good to ask the MP, our MP, to find out where that's sitting in the government at the moment, because Airbnb themselves want a national register. But I sort of echo what Councillor Byrne said. I just wonder what it is that we're going to accomplish, apart from what we already can do, something extra and adding value. I'm not sure. I mean, I looked at the design of the task group and asking the questions, and I'm just a bit confused as to exactly what it is that's going to happen, because it is about balance, and it's about the economy, it's about tourism, and it's about local need. And those three things are very, very complex. And I'm not sure a Task and Finish group is going to come up with any definitive answers. That's just my personal opinion.
What do you think then, Simon?
Well, I respectfully disagree, probably for the first time with Councillor Timpey. But yeah, and as Councillor Cook was saying, we have willing participants. I think we have. I did contribute the draft terms of reference, and I mentioned before I might have had 3 shredded wheat and too many espressos before I wrote them. So I'm very happy for them to be slimmed down to something achievable and focused. But I think, you know, what we can look at is to understand the situation, things like compare what other areas have done, because sometimes there's no point in reinventing the wheel, and avoiding some of the pitfalls that some areas have quite recently. I think it's Tor Bay have sort of come unstuck by causing more problems than they'd anticipated through raising council tax very high. So avoiding the pitfalls that they may have encountered, and then, you know, look at what is within our gift, such as council tax and business rates. Working with the Chamber of Commerce, you know, it might be a simple solution that we come up with just to support the Chamber of what's happening with the Chamber of Commerce Business Improvement District and supporting them in what they are doing. So, you know, hopefully, I think if we keep it focused, we can avoid overcomplicating it and just come up with, you know, what it is is within our gift, understanding the situation and looking at what priorities we would want to recommend to Cabinet or to Council that we manage locally to the betterment of Rye and Winchelsea. And it might be something along the lines of zoning, streets or areas to attempt to limit the number of Airbnbs in a particular area, this kind of thing. Or just we might come away and actually think, well, Airbnb is actually contributing more than we thought, but can they be included in the Accommodation Business Improvement District levy that Councillor Bayliss is mentioning, and can we bring them into that so that at least they're contributing to the local infrastructure? So there are any number of options, but I think we we absolutely need to be focused, practical, and be very clear on what our outcomes should be to make recommendations based on them to council.
Yeah, well, what we've got to do, we sort of, yeah, that's it, yeah. We're going to get the terms of reference drawn up for the next meeting, so we can sort of ratify it next meeting. So if you want to sort of get up and not have so many Weetabix and a cup of tea as opposed to 2 cups of coffee, if you want to sort of work up something that you feel, or the chamber maybe, you know, a terms of reference to work on, send it to yeah, go on.
I'm already on 2 task and finishes groups, and they're not completed yet, so I need to be careful I don't overstretch myself. So, because I'm on the local plan group, and I'm also on the housing and development group, and that's not finished yet. So, if there's going to be push ahead, I think it would be unwise to take anything else on at the minute.
Yeah, all right, well, we'll include you anyway, and give you a dispensation, but Simon and I, we can work something out on the terms of reference and get it back to the next meeting in November.
That's coercive, you know that, don't you?
Right. No, we won't be meeting this side of Christmas.
Chairman, what are the one thing we might want to give you a steer on is what are the rules about composition? Normally we take evidence from outside bodies, but it does seem to me that another rating authority might have a role in membership, but I don't know whether that's precluded or not.
Well, sort of.
Right Town Council, they could fill in the office.
But then I could argue that I need Icklesham Parish Council and Canberra Parish Council. So I don't think we want to go down that route. I think we work with the Chamber. If the Chamber have expressed to me and to you that they would like to be part of it. So if the Chamber want to be part of it, then that's fine, and we can use others as witnesses, and we can call in the Town Council if we wish to, or the Parish Council's gone. But we'll work on the terms of reference and we'll bring it back to the next meeting. Happy to move that? Yeah, seconded. All those in favour? Terry's not. Thank you. 1 against. Abstain. Carried, not unanimously. Thank you very much. Work programme, page 99 to 100. Yes, it has been a long agenda. That one's done. So the 18th, what have we got? Medium-term financial plan, draft revenue budget proposals, performance report, second quarter, savings assurance report, impact of Airbnbs, as we've just said, and that is probably enough for that. Did I hear a whisper that the removed item from Cabinet of last week with regard to community grants, was that going to come via scrutiny? No, I just wondered. No. Probably should do, but we'll wait and see if we're asked. Yeah, and on Thursday, we will have training in this room at 9:30? 9:30 with the lady who gave us a training a couple of weeks ago in the evening, who I thought was in a really fancy apartment, but it didn't get dark. When we started, it was daylight. When we finished, outside my window, it was dark. She was still in daylight. So she got rumbled. And when I asked her, she said, no, I'm in my basement. It's a joint session with officers, so you've got to be on your best behaviour. It's been a long one, but it's been a useful one. I declare the meeting closed at 9:05. Thank you all for your attendance. And yeah, I've missed University Challenge. Thank you.